All right, let's dive into some really profound stuff today.
Deep stuff.
Catholic teachings on happiness.
Oh, wow.
Specifically,
Okay.
we're unpacking the Beatitudes from the Sermon on the Mount,
Yes.
and we're using a sermon by Bishop Robert Barron as our guide,
Okay.
who really breaks down these ancient teachings in a way that resonates in our modern world.
Yeah.
It's almost like having the ultimate self-help guru
The Son of God himself.
giving us this step-by-step guide to happiness.
Right.
But some of these Beatitudes sound a bit confusing at first glance.
Yeah.
Like, blessed are the poor in spirit.
It definitely challenges our usual ideas about happiness.
Yeah,
We often think happiness is about accumulating things, wealth, status, possessions.
right.
But this first beatitude tackles that head on.
So instead of constantly trying to build ourselves up,
Bishop Barron points out that it's all about conquering pride.
we should be focusing on humbling ourselves.
Exactly.
It's
It's about recognizing that true happiness,
Yeah.
what they call beatitudo in
Hmm.
Latin, comes from a place of humility,
Okay.
from emptying ourselves of that ego-driven need for more, more, more.
I can see how that connects to Catholic teachings on selflessness and service,
Right.
but how does emptying ourselves actually lead to happiness?
Think about it this way.
Yeah.
When we're constantly striving for more,
Okay.
we're never truly satisfied.
Hmm.
It's like trying to fill a bottomless pit.
Right.
But when we shift our focus outward,
Okay.
when we start living for something greater than ourselves,
Yeah.
that's where we find true fulfillment.
Okay. I'm starting to see the connection.
It's about moving away from that me, me, me mentality and focusing on serving others, giving back, contributing to something bigger than ourselves.
Right.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And this resonates deeply with Catholic teachings on charity and love of neighbor.
Okay.
It's about recognizing our inherent dignity and that of others and acting accordingly.
That makes a lot of sense.
These ancient teachings still hold so much relevance today.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
So let's move on to the next one.
Okay.
Blessed are they who mourn, for they shall be comforted.
All right.
Now, this one really throws me for a loop.
Yeah.
How can mourning possibly lead to happiness?
This one is tricky.
Yeah.
Our culture tells us to avoid negative emotions at all costs.
Right.
But Bishop Barron argues that this beatitude is about facing our sins head on.
So it's not about wallowing in sadness
Right.
or despair.
It's about acknowledging where we've messed up,
Okay.
the ways we've fallen short of God's expectations.
And that comfort comes from knowing we are loved and forgiven by God.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And it also frees us from the burden of carrying those sins around with us.
So it's like finally letting go of a heavy weight we've been carrying for far too long.
Exactly.
Okay. On to the third beatitude.
Okay.
Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth.
All right.
Now, this one seems to go against our modern-day emphasis on ambition and assertiveness.
You're right. It goes against the grain of our go-getter culture.
Isn't meekness often seen as weakness?
But in the context of the Beatitudes,
Yeah.
meekness isn't about being passive or submissive.
Okay.
Bishop Barron explains that it's about humility.
Humility.
Yeah.
So it's about recognizing our place in the grand scheme of things,
That's a great way to put it.
understanding that we're not the center of the universe.
And it ties into the Catholic understanding of surrendering to God's will,
Okay.
acknowledging that He is ultimately in control.
I'm seeing a pattern here.
Yeah.
These Beatitudes seem to be challenging our conventional ideas about success and happiness,
You're catching on quickly.
encouraging us to look inward rather than outward for fulfillment.
And this leads us perfectly to the next Beatitude.
Okay.
Blessed are they who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied.
Okay, this one seems a bit more straightforward.
Okay.
We all have desires and things we strive for, right? Whether it's success in our careers,
Yeah.
meaningful relationships, or even just a good meal.
But this beatitude asks us to consider what we're truly hungry for. Okay.
Bishop Barron emphasizes that true, lasting satisfaction
Yeah.
comes from hungering for righteousness,
Okay.
for a deeper connection with God.
So it's about aligning our desires with God's will,
Exactly.
seeking holiness above all else.
Catholic teaching emphasizes that our ultimate goal should be union with God.
Okay.
And this beatitude reminds us that true fulfillment comes from pursuing that goal with all our hearts.
It's a powerful message for sure.
It is.
But how do we even begin to cultivate that hunger for righteousness?
Well, that's where things start to get really interesting.
Okay.
And that's what we'll be diving into next.
So how do we even begin to cultivate that hunger for righteousness?
It's definitely a journey.
It feels like a pretty tall order.
It is.
Yeah.
But Bishop Barron suggests We start by looking at the things we're already hungering for.
Okay.
Are they truly satisfying us,
Right.
or are they leaving us feeling empty and wanting more?
He uses that analogy of trying to quench our thirst with salt water.
Yes.
It just makes us more thirsty. Yeah.
So often we're chasing after things that can't truly fulfill us.
Yeah.
Wealth, fame, power. Catholic teaching reminds us that these things are fleeting.
Right.
They can't provide lasting happiness.
So it's about recognizing that our deepest desires,
Right.
that yearning for true happiness,
Exactly.
can only be fulfilled by something greater than ourselves.
Yes.
Something eternal.
And that brings us to the fifth beatitude,
Okay.
which Bishop Barron says is really at the heart of the Christian life.
Okay.
Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy.
This one is particularly interesting to me.
Okay.
It seems to be saying that the more we show mercy to others,
Yeah.
the more we'll receive it ourselves.
That's a great insight.
Yeah.
And it's a core tenet of Catholic teaching.
Okay.
We believe that God is infinitely merciful
Right.
and that we're called to reflect that mercy in our own lives.
But what does it really mean to be merciful?
It goes deeper than that.
Is it just about being kind and forgiving? Bishop Barron talks about hesed in Hebrew and misericordia in Latin, both of which translate to compassion.
Okay.
It's about feeling the suffering of others as your own,
Right.
entering into their pain with empathy and love.
That sounds incredibly difficult,
It is challenging.
especially in a world that often encourages us to look out for ourselves first.
But it's also incredibly rewarding when we practice mercy.
Yeah.
We're participating in something much larger than ourselves. We're tapping into the very heart of God's love.
And by showing mercy to others,
Yes.
we're opening ourselves up to receiving that same mercy from God.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
a beautiful cycle. The
Yeah.
more we give, the more we receive.
Right.
The more we love, the more we are loved.
Okay, on to the sixth beatitude.
Okay.
Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God.
Right?
Now, this one always feels a bit mysterious to me.
Yeah.
What exactly does it mean to be pure in heart?
Bishop Barron explains it as having a single focus, a unifying principle that guides all our actions and decisions.
So it's about aligning our will with God's will,
I love that analogy.
making him the center of our lives.
And it ties into the Catholic emphasis on having a right intention in all that we do.
Okay.
It's not just about doing good deeds,
Right.
but doing them for the right reasons,
Mhm.
out of love for God and neighbor.
So it's about having that purity of intention,
Precisely.
that genuine desire to please God in all that we do.
And when we live with that kind of purity,
Yeah.
we begin to see God working in our lives,
Okay.
even in the most ordinary of moments.
All right, let's move on to the seventh beatitude.
Okay.
Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God.
It's incredibly timely.
Now, this one seems particularly relevant in today's world,
Yes.
where there's so much conflict and division.
And Bishop Barron makes a crucial distinction.
Okay.
It's not simply about being peaceful ourselves,
Okay.
but about actively working to create peace.
So it's not about being passive or avoiding conflict. It's
Yeah.
it's about being a force for reconciliation.
Yes.
For bringing people together, for building bridges.
And this aligns with Catholic social teaching,
Okay.
which emphasizes our responsibility to work for justice and peace in the world.
Right.
We're called to be instruments of God's peace,
Mm.
to heal divisions and promote understanding.
It's a challenging calling,
It is.
but also a deeply inspiring one.
It speaks to the transformative power of peacemaking.
Yeah. And the reward,
Yes.
being called children of God, is pretty incredible.
When we choose to be peacemakers,
Yeah.
we're aligning ourselves with God's will,
Okay.
and we become more like Him in the process.
Okay, we've arrived at the final beatitude.
Okay.
Blessed are they who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
Oh, right.
Now, this one always seems a bit paradoxical to me.
It's definitely counterintuitive.
How can persecution possibly be a path to happiness?
But Bishop Barron reminds us that in a fallen world,
Yeah.
where good and evil are constantly at odds, those who stand up for what's right will inevitably face opposition.
So persecution can actually be a sign that we're on the right path,
That's exactly it.
that we're living in accordance with God's will.
And it's a theme that runs throughout the history of the church,
Mm.
from the early martyrs to those who face persecution for their faith today.
Yeah.
This beatitude reminds us that suffering for righteousness' sake is a participation in Christ's own suffering.
And ultimately, it leads to the greatest reward of all,
Absolutely.
the kingdom of heaven.
And that brings us full circle.
Okay.
These beatitudes, from poverty of spirit to persecution for righteousness,
Right.
paint a picture of a life that's radically different from the world's definition of success and happiness.
It's a life that's centered on God, on humility, on service, on love.
And paradoxically, it's in living this kind of life that we find true and lasting happiness. It's a
Yeah.
challenging path, for sure,
Right.
but it's the path that leads to true fulfillment.
So what does this all mean for us?
That's a great question.
For the listener who's been on this journey with us today?
And I think the answer lies in the challenge Bishop Barron leaves us with at the end of his sermon.
He encourages us to go back to Matthew chapter 5
He's right.
to really ponder these Beatitudes and to see how we can apply them to our own lives.
These ancient teachings have the power to transform our lives if we allow them to.
Yeah.
They offer a roadmap to a life of purpose, meaning, and ultimately of true happiness.
It's like we've been given this incredible treasure map,
Exactly.
and it's up to us to follow it,
And remember, it's not about achieving some kind of perfect beatitude state.
to see where it leads.
It's about the journey,
Okay.
about continually striving to live out these teachings in our daily lives.
It's amazing how these teachings, delivered over 2,000 years ago, can still feel so fresh and relevant today.
That's the power of truth, isn't it?
Yeah.
It transcends time and place.
Right.
And the Beatitudes are all about uncovering those fundamental truths about human happiness and fulfillment.
Bishop Barron mentioned something interesting about how a lot of people, even those who aren't Catholic, are drawn to the Beatitudes.
He did, and I think it's because they speak to something deep within us, a longing for something more than the fleeting pleasures of this world.
Right.
They offer a glimpse of a different way of living, a way that leads to true and lasting joy.
It's like they're tapping into that innate desire for goodness and happiness that's woven into the fabric of our being.
Exactly, and they show us that this happiness isn't found in accumulating wealth or chasing after fleeting pleasures, but in aligning ourselves with God's will in living a life of love and service.
You know, as we've been discussing these Beatitudes, I've been thinking about how easy it is to get caught up in the busyness of life, to lose sight of these fundamental truths.
It's so easy to get swept away by the current, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that's why it's so important to regularly revisit these teachings, to ground ourselves in them, to let them shape our perspective and guide our actions.
Bishop Barron encourages us to not just read the Beatitudes, but to really ponder them, to wrestle with them, to see how they can be applied to our daily lives.
It's not enough to simply admire them from afar.
Right.
We have to internalize them.
Mm.
Let them seep into our hearts and minds. Allow them to transform us from the inside out.
He even suggested picking one Beatitude each week
What a fantastic idea.
and focusing on it, seeing how we can live it out in a concrete way.
It's about taking these teachings out of the realm of abstract ideas and
Yeah.
putting them into practice in our relationships, our work, our interactions with the world around us.
So for our listeners, we wrap up this deep dive. We encourage you to take Bishop Barron's challenge to heart pick one Beatitude that resonates with you this week. Maybe it's blessed are the merciful or blessed are the peacemakers.
Reflect on it.
Yeah.
Meditate on it. Ask yourself how you can embody that beatitude in your daily life. How can you be a source of mercy and compassion in your interactions with others? How can you be an instrument of peace in your family, your community, your workplace?
Don't be afraid to get creative. Think outside the box. Look for opportunities to put these teachings into action in tangible ways.
You might be surprised by the ways in which these ancient words can come alive in your life, bringing with them a deeper sense of joy, meaning, and purpose.
This has been a truly inspiring exploration of the Beatitudes. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep seeking, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.